Our first speaker today is Yvette van Engelen, General Manager of the Adelaide Biomed City. The Adelaide Biomed City we're going to hear all about, but it's a $3.8 billion health and biomed innovation district right here on North Terrace. Yvette is also the independent chair of last year's newly established statewide Genomics Centre, together with Professor David Liu. She led the development of the business plan for the SAGC, SAGC secured federal funding and achieved all relevant key institutes in South Australia, committing to a partnership which is supported with more than $7 million worth of investment. Please welcome.
Welcome in Adelaide Biomed City Innovation District. I always appreciate welcoming a diverse group of industry leaders. One of our key focus areas is really grow industry research collaboration and really looking at that multidisciplinary approach. So it's great to have you here all today. I think my presentation is, yes, it's there, that's great news. If you look across the globe, a lot of governments are heavily investing in innovation districts. And they've seen the evidence around the impact on economic and social growth. If you look, for example, of R&D activity, it is estimated to have up to 75% of impact on the effective productivity growth. And if you look at the returns, it's up to 10 to 30% private returns and even more than 40% social returns. So also our government has heavily invested here in innovation districts in South Australia, amongst others Adelaide Biomed City. Some of you might know Adelaide Biomed City quite well, so I'll just give a quick snapshot. It's a $3.8 billion investment, private and public, and it's comprised of leading-edge tech institutes, like a hospital, a Royal Adelaide Hospital, Women's and Children's Hospital is coming in a couple of years, moving here into the Innovation District. We are here at SEMRI and the University buildings, all Anchor institutes. And in there and surrounding us are a lot of entrepreneurs, small and larger, industry and companies connected with us. So what happens lately? You know, I heard some CEO of health industry telling me that I'm only here 4 years in South Australia, but in the past, all the international delegations were flying to Sydney, Melbourne, up to Perth. They kind of skipped Adelaide from the plane down, and that's changing. In the last couple of years, the many international delegations that are residing here are significant, and the interest is shown, and also how they are kind of amazed about the quality of research and infrastructure and what's happening in South Australia. So we're a good spot, and they show their interest because this is that one-side access to a lot of knowledge, a lot of researchers, a lot of businesses. And we're part of a broader ecosystem of Innovation District. We recently established an Innovation Alliance together with Top 14 and Tansley, and hopefully some others will join us in the future. And that's really looking at that multidisciplinary approach. We all know that the future of healthcare is multidisciplinary. Areas as biomedical engineering, artificial intelligence, robotics, AR and VR are all very impactful for the future of our sector. Hence, also very glad to have Terry Sweeney here, which is looking at the digital health and all some of the emerging technologies integrated further into our healthcare sector. If you look also at, we've done a significant piece of work around global best practice. What does good look like and what does it take to get there? In that sense, we're an emerging precinct, only formally signed a collaboration agreement in 2018. So we're in a maturity pathway, so we did our work. But I showed here the state plans because the importance of a close partnership with your state government is key to the success of an innovation district as ours. And I can tell you that our strategy is very much aligned with all our state strategies, and we're working really closely together on them. So people use clusters, precinct, innovation district, kind of interchangeable, and I think it's important to understand what it is, but also what the value it brings. So here you see it's a cluster. That's how we started as well. Most innovation districts start like that. You have a hospital or research institute and more people come around it because there's a lot of knowledge there. So you start at a cluster. Not a lot is happening yet. But then you mature into the precincts. You see there are more parties coming in the game, more communication and collaboration is happening. You see the uplift at the bottom, productivity uplift of 20%. And then you mature to an innovation district, and that's where Adelaide Bible City is in the maturity pathway. And you see that uplift from 20 to 50% productivity. You see that there are more companies coming in the game, more entrepreneurs, small enterprises, a lot of multidisciplinary approach, but also VC firms, legal firms residing, residential firms residing in your innovation districts. So we have a couple of key assets here. We have physical assets, knowledge and economic assets, and networking assets, which makes us of interest to all those global and local parties. But if you look at those physical assets, I noticed that a lot of local industry, but also even researchers residing here, are not aware of the quality of world-class infrastructure we have here in these precincts. If you look at our imaging suites or our genomic suites, and a lot of opportunities for our local industry to really start collaborating with us, leveraging, using the infrastructure. And I just mentioned two, but we have a wide range, and I will mention them further on in my presentation. And these are some of the new developments. If I look from an infrastructure perspective, the physical assets, these are some of the new developments happening. The Australian Rec Centre that's coming here next door, it's already far in development phase. And we have the Women's and Children's Hospital planned to move into an innovation district and to more private investments developments that are more at early stage. But all these new developments really give us opportunity for industry to co-localize close to researchers, universities, our hospitals, our patients, our data. And that's, again, a lot of interest from different areas. I mentioned healthcare market. Health and medical is one of the priority sectors in our state. And we're the fastest growing sector in our state. And we have clear targets in 2030. It's a double growth as well. So we're significantly growing. And if you look at some of the global markets we're riding in, you see this significant increase in markets. In medical devices, digital health, that's Terry Sweeney's area, so you see this nice upward curve. So again, loads of opportunities, also for exporting globally. But also if you look at those emerging technologies that are transforming our healthcare sector, such as AI, exponential growth in there. So these are the markets we're residing in, and it shows the opportunities that are there. Then some of our capabilities. It's kind of a list of 2 slides, but maybe good to highlight if any of you is interested. We have weekly mini reviews, which we make short webinar, and we produce the videos of it. It's kind of a telex database. It doesn't look as fancy as telex database, but we're going there. It's on our website of Adelaide Bible City, and it gives you this snapshot of certain areas, research platforms, who are key leaders, the key research groups, and also the industry collaboration that's already happening. It's kind of an interesting database to look at if you're interested to enter any of our capability platforms or research groups. And again, it ranges from small animals, large animal houses, to genomics, as I mentioned, microscopy, AI, clinical trials, large registries, data biobanks. It's quite extensive. Just to conclude, we really welcome industry, we welcome partnerships. Please contact us, just go to our website if you're interested to have a conversation, if you're seeking for certain capabilities, if you're seeking for certain people. Please go online, look at mini webinar reviews and some other sources you can find. And I've done a presentation, I think 3 years ago for Brand SA. At that time, and I wasn't in the job that long, and I was lined up after the minister and the CEO ceremony, so I was quite nervous. And I look back at that presentation, which is I think roughly 3 years ago, and if I see the significant change since then, I think we can really be proud of all the people here in the sector. And if I look at the future and the significant opportunities we have, it's only getting better. So I hope I'll welcome you back in another 2-3 years.
Thanks, Yvette. I'm sure lots of questions. Well, what we'll do is we'll go through and then I think do Q&A at the end. Now to the wonderful Di Mantle. Now, I was in with Di only a few weeks ago when we were planning and organising this, and she pushed me out because her last minute spot for her vaccination had become available, and I tried to sneak on the back of the queue so that I could actually, because I figured we see a lot of people. So, unfortunately, she didn't get to sneak me in. I had to wait at my first jobs the other day. So Yvette, thank you, Yvette. Di Mantle is the CEO of Celsus since for the past 7 years. And Celsus is the consortium that manages and maintains the next door neighbour, the world-leading Royal Adelaide Hospital, under the one of its kind and first public-private sector joint venture partnership, which I think we could probably sit here and spend the entire time just talking about how on earth that came about and how you jumped through hoops to get that sorted. But that one is for another day, definitely. And Celsus provides facility management with a patient-centric philosophy, which serves the growing needs of South Australia while setting the global benchmark for future hospitals. And Celsus, which I think I was about to talk to us about, just achieved the first healthcare sustainability loan globally of $2.2 billion. That's the first sustainability loan in Australia and the largest healthcare, environmental, social and governance loan in the Asia Pacific. So, very exciting. I welcome you up to the stage, Doug.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out. I was saying to my team earlier, I think people are just craving any opportunity to get out, so hopefully I won't disappoint you. I have been the CEO, so I've been in Adelaide, so I've come from Perth. I came for a 3-year contract in 2014. I was headhunted, which is always very exciting. It never happened to me before. I'm not sure it'll happen again. I was headhunted from the Fiona Stanley project in Perth, where I was happily ensconced with my family. I came for 3 years, and then in 2017, for those of you who've been long-standing Adelaide folk, the Royal Adelaide Hospital finally opened its doors for the new hospital. The previous hospital was in place for 175 years, so I think it was okay to make sure that we got it right before we opened. So I've been the CEO here since 2017. So I've just about clocked up 7 years being in Adelaide, so thank you all for being very kind since I've been here. I am a clinician originally, so I do get hospitals. I was a nurse 100 years ago, and I have got a critical care experience, but I've been very fortunate that I've had the opportunity to work now in WA. I was working for the government sector, and I'd always been a government employee. And I did the development of the Fiona Stanley Hospital with an amazing group of people. And I had the opportunity to establish the 25 service contract for facility management over there, which the government in WA is gradually pulling apart, but that's a whole different discussion. And then when I came over here, I was invited to be employed by the private sector, employed by a company at the time that was called SA Health Partnerships. We rebranded in 2017 because we kept being confused with SA Health, which wasn't terribly helpful at the time. So I've been here since then, and my job was initially to get the hospital open from a construction site to an operating hospital, and now it's to keep it going and doing all sorts of amazing things. The Royal Adelaide Hospital is the largest public hospital in South Australia. It's the largest accredited teaching hospital. Just for a size point of view, it's 7 times larger than the Samri that we are in. Not that we're worried about being bigger, but it's pretty cool. If you worked it out, we actually span the equivalent of 3 city blocks, and there's about 4 hectares of landscape parks and gardens, and that's internal and external. The philosophy of the hospital is that it is a hospital within a park. and a park within the hospital. So for those who have been inside, from the time you walk in and the atrium is just to the right-hand side of the picture, you actually feel like it's open and welcoming, not that it's closed in and you can smell hospitals. Anyone who's been in old hospitals should know what I mean. So it should be a very welcoming experience to make people feel more relaxed and more at ease as they go in. The artwork that you can see is a beautiful piece that's called The Leaf, which was donated to us. And the leaf, the garden is now gradually growing around it, so that's very cool. For those who are the IT tech people here, we do have 2 million kilometres of just ICT cable that runs around the building, so we have got a significant backbone in what we've got. So what is Celsius? Celsius is the largest company that you've probably never ever heard of. We are the company that we're called a special purpose vehicle. These companies are put together just for running public-private partnerships. Some run across a number of different organisations and businesses. We were put together just for the Royal Adelaide Hospital. So our job and our remit was that we would source $2.5 billion worth of finance. Then we would design, construct and now operate the facility services. So to be really clear, anything clinical is run by the state, but we are there to support them in every way that we possibly can and to also make sure that the facility works. And we're committed to do that until 2046. And at the end of 2046, in June in fact, we are due to hand the building back to the state in exactly the same condition it was, or better than it was at commercial acceptance in June 2017. So public-private partnerships, we are the first in South Australia. We have an extensive governance structure, as you could imagine. I report to a board of directors. We've just got a couple less directors at the moment, which is a bit exciting. I do report to 18 banks. Prior to the refinance, which I'll talk about, we had 28 banks. It's a lot of people to keep happy, let me tell you. They are spread across the world, so it is a diverse group of people. Our directors on the board have extensive experience in hospitals, and they have investment and component of them of at least 50 to 55 hospitals around the world. So we come with a lot of experience. When people, just as one elephant in the room, when people talk about how expensive the RAR is to run and what it's cost, the reason is because what you pay for is you pay for it to be maintained in that position until 2046. If you build a hospital normally, in my experience of working in hospitals, you build them and they're a really high standard, and then over time they run down. You get peaks of them being fixed up prior to accreditation, as people would know, where you paint the wall, then you patch the doors and all those things. But it's hard to get funding once you've had a major investment in government infrastructure. So what you get with the PPP is the commitment that it must be maintained. So all the fancy bits of equipment that you'll see in the slides are maintained like you wouldn't believe. So it's a very major investment. And it is social infrastructure, which is really, really important to me and the team that I work with, many of which are here, and also to my board of directors. We have 3 key subcontractors. We had the build-up with HYLC. They've now pretty much finished. They're not on site, but they're still around. DXC Technology do our ICT section for our part of the contract, not to be confused with the fact that they've also got state health contracts, and Spotless Services Limited run a number of services. So the types of services that we run are listed there. So logistics and technology is a fancy word for our ICT systems. So that's the interface. We've got a help desk on site where all of our calls are logged or emailed through to, and we've got KPIs of when we have to respond to those. We do catering. All the food is cooked on site. We have bulk stores distribution. We have cleaning. We have pest control. We have patient support services, grounds and gardens, facility maintenance, all those things that make the building work and make it tick. So just a few fun facts for you all. We have 700 overnight beds and 100 day beds, so we do have 800 beds. The little red star person at the bottom. We have 40 technical suites, which is the new age term that picks up operating theatres, diagnostic rooms and those areas. which is cool. We have 220 computer servers on site. We have 25 AGVs, which is a name for automated guided vehicles. For those of you who follow the local media, they call them robots in the media. Not my favourite term for anything on the site. Robots are what people keep thinking are the things that people think serve meals to patients. It's not the Jetsons, we don't. Well, that shows your age. The AGVs are the picture on the top. So they are a flatbed machine. They are all computer arranged and organised. They run through a Wi-Fi system throughout the building. There are 25 of them in the building. They are not inpatient areas. They run mainly on level 1, which is the facility management floor. They've got their own dedicated lifts, which we had to work through a process of how WorkSafe would work with those, because we were the first people in the state to have them. And people can't get into the lift with an AGV because you can get trapped. So there's a lot of stuff to work through. But the idea is they go along, they speak the German, so they speak with the German accent when they're turning right or turning left. But they go along, and the trolleys at the bottom that you can see in the picture are the rethermalisation carts for the food. Those carts have a cold side and a hot side. They go into a docking station, which is the yellow part that you can see at the top. The food is all cooked fresh on site and tray plated and put in there, and then it either goes on the hot side or the cold side. And then once they're ready to go up to the ward, the AGVs go along and slide in under those wheels. The trolleys sit higher than most trolleys do normally on the site. They slide under there, they lift them up, they slide them up to the lobby, take them up to the ward, slide them off, and then staff on the ward get the trolleys and serve them out. AGVs deliver food, remove waste, do medical supplies, and a few other things. What's really good about them, they came in not to get rid of staff, which is what the unions were concerned about, but it's actually to decrease manual handling injuries, which is you get a lot with people handling waste, food, linen, and certainly both clean and dirty laundry. They work 24/7. You can program them to work overnight so they're not disruptive to anybody else. They don't take smokers and they don't have sick days, so they're very useful to have. They do about 1,200 trips per year. It's probably increased since then because we now do waste, which originally you couldn't do with AGVs. This is the view out the front of the building. We've got 70 courtyards and 300 bicycle parks. We have end-of-trip facilities on the site. We've got 2 helicopter pad parking capacity, which is up on level 7. It's a brilliant view. The media always love taking their shots from up there. We serve 17,000 meals per week, so that's a lot of runs in the AGVs with those trolleys. We go through 3,500 litres of milk in a week. So we do a lot, and the food is all purchased locally as much as is possible, and it is sourced fresh. So we try really hard to do fresh food. It is cooked and then chilled and then served, but it does not come in as frozen lean cuisine type meals. So as Steve mentioned, in July this year, we did a refinancing of our term facility. And if you look at this, and I've explained it to some friends recently who didn't understand what I did, not unusual. What it is, it's a bit like when your mortgage runs down and you decide you've got to refinance and you want to try and get a really good deal. Ours was going and refinancing $2.2 billion, so a small amount of money. So in doing so, we had the opportunity to go to the banks, our 28 banks strong, and get a new loan that we could have, or we had an opportunity to go for something called a sustainability loan. Green and social loans are very, very new. A sustainability loan recognises that you've made an investment in social infrastructure, that you have got a number of green criteria that you have to meet. There's UN sustainability goals, and you have to have your application assessed by somebody independently to say that you meet these criteria. So you can't just say you think you're really good and you should get it. It doesn't work like that. So when we decided to do it, and it was very late in the piece, so we decided early this year that we would go for the loan. We were aware that there weren't a lot of other people who'd done it, so we were breaking new ground. But my team and I were up for the challenge. I'm not sure that they thought they were up for the challenge at the time, but they were up for the challenge. So what we had to do, we deem ourselves as a green project, so we were awarded a 4-star Green Star Healthcare As-Built rating, it's a mouthful, by the Green Building Council of Australia from that as-built design of the building. So we received that back in 2017. So we knew that we had a sustainable design and that we had a number of features which are listed there that made us qualify as a green project. So we were very fortunate, and I have to say I am really proud of the gardens and the way the building presents externally. And for anybody who hasn't been inside, the courtyards inside are made to make people feel like that they're really in a comfortable place, and so it's not really difficult for them. The art of healing is enhanced by people being able to see light and day and being able to see greenery versus looking at a white wall and a whole lot of clinicians walking past. So we met the green criteria, but then we had to also look at the social loan principles, and these principles only came into play in April of this year. So no one else had gone for them, and everyone thought we were a bit wacko, I think, trying to go early. But what it was the hospital itself lends itself to being a social project. It's social infrastructure. The building is a teaching facility, and in addition to teaching and research, and I think it's important that we're part of the Biomed precinct and are very cognizant of being helpful in that area. But we also provide access to essential services for a large number of people. So we provide it for culturally and linguistically diverse people. We provide it for Indigenous people, and there are specific Indigenous services on site. We've got statewide services that are available to people both in South Australia and in the Northern Territory. And so we were very much felt that we met the criteria for the social standard. So it was important then that those areas could link together and we could achieve.
The new Royal Adelaide Hospital represents the biggest infrastructure project ever undertaken in South Australian history. It's been a game changer. But designing, constructing and operating the nation's most advanced hospital is one thing, but financing this complex, state-of-the-art hospital is quite another. And on that score, the new RA is breaking new ground. Celsus, the private partner and facilities operator at the hospital, has secured the world's largest green and social loan in the healthcare sector and the largest project finance green sustainability loan in Australia.
The idea behind these is that it provides an opportunity for organisations to make a commitment to more than just financing a project. It entails us making a commitment to environmental and social objectives.
It's a $2.2 billion transaction involving a host of banks and financial institutions.
There are a number of components that have helped us achieve this green loan using rainwater in the facility to ensure that we reuse the water rather than waste it, such as using it for flushing toilets and other components. So we try and be as green and sustainable as possible.
Harvested rainwater also ensures the hospital's many courtyards and green spaces thrive. These spacious natural settings assist with patient recovery. The new RA, with its 700 single rooms, also produces renewable energy on site through the use of waste heat from its cogeneration system to provide heating and hot water. As a result, the Royal Adelaide Hospital was the first large-scale hospital complex in Australia to achieve a 4-star Green Star rating. That rating is based on its sustainable design and construction, as well as its operation, fit-out and positive impact on staff and patients.
Worldwide, people are becoming more conscious of their responsibility both to the environment and socially. And Celsus would like to take a lead in South Australia. We want others to also extend their commitment on the green and social side.
This will be a groundbreaking piece of financing for Australia and internationally. Being able to get a loan that is of this size and this credibility in the green and social market is an extraordinary achievement for us.
We certainly see that this is a landmark transaction for Australia and South Australia in particular.
The new RA is embracing new financing arrangements for a new era. They underline how new perspectives on funding a major hospital like this one are ushering in a new world of sustainable finance. It's a game-changing approach that's good for all South Australians and the environment.
I thought it was better than just listening to me explain it again. So I think hopefully that explains a little about why we did what we did and how it works. And I'd like to thank Hughes for helping us do the video, and Ron, who's our consistent supporter, and Rohit, my co-star, is here. So just finally, so the linkages to the Sustainable Development Goals are a very real piece of criteria now that you have to meet. And once you've met the criteria, then you have to continue to report against it as you go forward. So every year, we have to publicly report against the criteria that we have agreed to. So it's not you just get it and they go, cool, come back in 4 years and see how you go. So for us, it means that we've made some significant commitments to the board and to the financiers about what we will do. So as Steve said, we now are the first healthcare sustainability loan globally. We are the first sustainability loan in Australia, and we are the largest healthcare, and ESG stands for Environmental Social Governance labelled loan in the Pacific. So we're pretty happy with where we've got to. Thank you.
South Australia punching way above its weight here. I'm sure Dr. Terry Sweeney's sitting there going, I wonder if I can get those vacuum robo rats as well. I wonder if we can get them just to go out and pick up the patients off the back of the ambulance, bring them in, so
Gina, no more rapping.
we can collect. But there's some real opportunities there I can see. So before we hit up the dial with some questions, just go get mine. As an Englishman that arrived in Australia in 2000 with a backpack, I figured I got an award last year and was pretty humbled, but it's all complete rubbish compared to introducing Dr. Terry Sweeney now. So 22 years of industry experience in digital health and healthcare innovation. Still nothing. Helps healthcare, life sciences, human services through use of technology and data. Managed to sell a company, I heard the other day, at the age of 16, apologies. The rest of us all just had acne and BMX spikes. For £20,000?
75,000.
75,000. It gets worse.
I can't tell you what year it is.
Yeah, but it's when there was DVDs and CDs. You know. As if that wasn't enough. Established and scaled 2 major startups acquired by global multinationals. You know, when IBM. It's just. And then not enough, I'm not even going to read anymore, honestly, but even the good old Queen gave you the nod as well. And then if that's not enough, as an avid cyclist, they represented Great Britain in the Commonwealth Games in cycling. I'm just
Attention deficit disorder.
I don't know why he's here, but I'm going to introduce Dr. Terry Sweeney.
Some of that's actually true. Folks, thanks for inviting me here today. I was thinking more about how can I combine the showcase SA lunches with the AGVs to deliver lobster to me daily autonomously. That would be the best use case, I think. That's right. So I'm going to talk to you all today a little bit about the technology and the digital health side of what we do in health and medical research. And I was going to start by saying is that the Digital Health Cooperative Research Centre, which I'm the CEO, we're a $200 million organisation, and I thought that was huge, but I'm in the company of billions, so we're just a rounding error when it comes to, I think, Celsius Adelaide Biomed City. So we're the Digital Health Cooperative Research Centre. There are 28 CRCs in Australia, and we all fall under the Department of Industry, Science and Technology. We're not a government organisation, but 50% of our funding comes from that particular government organisation, Commonwealth Government Department, and the other 50% comes from our beautiful partners, some of which are here today, so University of SA. We're doing some wonderful things with the Department for Trade and Investment, digital health as an industry, and I think we've got some exciting announcements, Stuart, coming in the next week or two on that. So we have about 70 partners, 16 of which are universities. We have industry partners like Telstra Health and Alcidion and Bupa, and then pretty much every state-based health system, including SA Health, is a partner of ours, as well as the Federal Department of Health. And we were set up over a 7-year CRC. We're 3 years in, so we've got 4 years left to run. Basically, people come to us with problems. So they have a problem to solve in health and medical research, and we want to deliver more services to people where they live. We want to deliver better health outcomes for Indigenous populations in regional and rural areas. We want to reduce the ramping at Flinders Medical Centre. I sit on the board of Southern Adelaide Local Health Network right as well. All of those kind of problems, and we look at the tech side of that, and how can we unlock digital technology to assist and support in solving some of those problems. So we kind of act as an intermediary service where we connect the problem with our ecosystem of partners. We put that jigsaw puzzle together in a way that we think we can not only solve that problem where we are in South Australia or wherever, but actually we can scale that nationally and internationally, and at the same time develop the Australian economy, create jobs, attract global talent. So as much as we're about solving real world problems in health and medical research, we're also about creating a digital health industry in Australia. We've got 3 physical sites. Sydney, which is kind of our head office, we just opened up a centre in Melbourne in the CBD. Clearly, none of our staff have seen those offices yet, unfortunately. And we've just launched in Adelaide at Lot 14. This side of North Terrace would probably be a more obvious choice for us, Biomed City. We like to think that we're connecting the bridge between the innovation and the tech folks across at Lot 14. We've got beautiful Amazon Web Services and other great organisations there, connecting that tech and entrepreneurship into health and medical research and acting as that bridge. From an industry point of view, I think your slide showed 300 billion by 2024. I've got the 2025 stats, so about $500 billion is the value of the digital health market globally by 2025. In Australia, we currently have about 1% of that, a couple of $1 billion as a digital health industry, which I think doesn't reflect badly on Australia, but it reflects on the fact that there's a lot of white space in digital health. I think we're only just starting to get going with it. So I think that presents a great opportunity for Australia and for South Australia to go and grab that market. And we certainly have the ingredients here with Biomed City, that Celsius is doing really well. We've got all the ingredients here to go out and pull as much of that global market into Australia and South Australia as we can. In addition to the CRC is a non-for-profit. We're actually a registered charity, and we're generally measured on the amount of money that we co-invest in projects. But we have spun out a commercialisation arm called Digital Hive, which is focusing on that digital health as an industry, doing great things with DTI and others here in South Australia. So that's just kind of who we are, what we do. I'll hopefully get on to the fun stuff now. So just kind of talking about the technology in general then, I always think as a patient and a consumer of health services, I am constantly underwhelmed by my engagement with the healthcare industry. That's no disrespect to anyone that's in this room. Clinical outcomes in Australia are fantastic. Customer service and health globally is pretty bad. And if we look at other industries and people's adoption and use of technology, I think there's a flow-on we need to do the same in healthcare. So if we look at retail, for example, you know, we've got an amazing number of tweets and Facebook updates that are posted each day. We still have a conversation in healthcare about security and privacy around our data. We shouldn't be having a conversation about that. That should be just par for the course. We should be talking about the benefits of unlocking all of the insights from that information. In oil and gas, I was actually involved in a Woodside project just a few years ago in a previous world, and looking at one of their oil rigs offshore that has 80,000 Internet of Things sensors, all gathering those tiny bits of data that help the oil rig and the gas rig run a little bit more efficiently and effectively, picking up problems early, detecting problems early, allocating the right resource to fix that problem. We see that heavily in the natural resource sector. Now in healthcare, the data's there, so we're going to generate about 1 million gigabytes of healthcare-related information in our lifetime. That's about 300 million textbooks, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. I've got my Fitbit here. We're monitoring and we're gathering not just text-based information, but audio, video, and other mediums in healthcare. Healthcare data is doubling roughly every 73 days at the moment. So we've got the information in healthcare. And we've also got some of the problems. So in Australia, we spend about 9% of GDP on health. That's a lot of money, $140 billion plus. I always put the US stat up there because it's astounding. They spend 17% of GDP on healthcare, and it's growing at 2.5 times the rate of their economy, which is astounding. And globally in health, about 30 cents in every dollar that we spend health system is wasted because of fraud and abuse and error. And we can do better. We can do better. And I think technology is a big part of that. The explosion of data, every day we create 2.5 quintillion bytes of information. 90% of all the data that exists in the world today, all of the data that exists in the world today, 90% of that was only created in the last 2 years. So we've just got this exponential growth of information that's being generated. We know a lot of the challenges in the healthcare system. Here's just a few. I have a lot of friends who are clinicians, and they call the one at the top in the middle pajama time. So a typical clinician would have to read 160 in 7 hours a week just to stay on top of the information that's relevant to what they do for a living. It's not their fault. It's impossible to read that amount of information. But there's so much information out there. From a digital interaction consumer perspective, we know that 75% of patients that are surveyed expect to consume digital health services at some stage in the future. Chronic disease still tends to be the most expensive healthcare factor. So $47 trillion globally spent on chronic disease. So this is things like diabetes and hypertension and other often lifestyle-related chronic disease. The stat that isn't there, but right now, if you go and see a doctor or a clinician, and again, it's not through no fault of their own, less than 50% of medicine is evidence-based. So 1 in 2 decisions that a clinician makes at the point of care is not based on all of the information relevant to making that decision. And that's because they just can't keep on top of all of the data. So they're the problems. Interesting kind of breakdown on that 1,100 terabytes of information that we as individuals are going to generate in our lifetime relating to health. We think of health information as being kind of clinical. We're starting to think of it as being genomic when we think about precision medicine and getting a genome test. We broke through the $1,000 genome test a long time ago now. I think it's only a few $100s to get a genome test. We're interpreting that information into meaningful ways to drive better targeted therapies. We think about those, but we don't necessarily think about those external exogenous factors. We call those the social determinants of health. So the lifestyle, diet and exercise are the obvious two, but we've got things like housing, community, education, employment, unemployment. All of those things have a big impact, have the majority of impact on our overall health and well-being. So what we're starting to see from a technology point of view is, yeah, we've got the clinical information available in the hospital EMR system. We're starting to get some of the precision and genomic information available by all the great work that organisations like SAMI does. But we need to start to look at those external factors and look at all of that information holistically to drive better patient outcomes. So there's some of the challenges and some of the opportunities, I think, when it comes to data and information. And at the same time, we've seen this huge paradigm shift in technology, right? So we've gone from these old tabulating systems that add things up, like a calculator, into programmable systems, which are still largely prevalent today. So these are the systems that are rules-based, they follow logic, they use largely structured text-based information, through to the modern age of AI and machine learning. Now, I put 2011 there, and I think that's when modern artificial intelligence started, but AI and algorithms has actually been around since the 60s. It's not new, but what they didn't have in the 60s was compute power, they didn't have the processing power, and they didn't have all of the data that is available today. So around about 2011, the data, the computing power, and the algorithms and the AI have kind of converged into the ability for it to be kind of meaningful and produce something useful for us. So the major differences between the largely prevalent programmable systems, very rules-based, if this then do that, if that then do this, through to the characteristics of AI and machine learning. So we train algorithms in AI and machine learning with data. The algorithms learn over time, so we go from supervised learning to unsupervised learning, so the ability for the machine to start to get a little smarter itself. The ability for the machine to start to learn how we interact with it and how we like our information served up. So the ability to differentiate on how these systems present information back to the individual. And the ability to scale our own thinking. Just to kind of make it a bit tangible and bring it to life, these are the protein interactions in a cell. So there are millions and sometimes billions of data points there. You imagine a medical researcher trying to sift through all of that and look for patterns and correlations and relationships and all of that data. It's a mammoth task. But this is what the AI would see. So it immediately understands the context of what you're trying to do with those protein interactions for the cell. It's looking for the patterns, the correlations, the relationships, the important data points that are relevant to what you're doing versus just generic. This looks quite interesting. So the ability for AI to understand the context in what you're doing is quite interesting. But when I talk about AI and other new and emerging technologies like blockchain and 5G, has got an important role to play in other new technologies. I always talk about, I used to refer to AI as augmented intelligence rather than artificial, to just kind of get across the point that it's a partnership between humanity and technology. I think if we're going to get the best outcomes, particularly in health and medical research, it's the partnership between the technology and the human, using the best of both, that's really going to drive the best results. So we know that humans are very good at those things across the top, and we also know the machines are very good at things at the bottom. I think you mentioned toilet breaks with the AGVs and things. It's the same with things like AI and machine learning. Modern AI now can read 4 billion pages of unstructured text per minute and assimilate it very, very quickly. We can't do that. So I'm really interested and excited about how we partner between humanity and technology to try and drive better outcomes. That's just a little bit of a glimpse into kind of the technology that we're looking at the Digital Health CRC. How do you apply that technology to real-world problems and real-world application? And how do you underpin that with the research to prove that you have had an impact and the things that you are doing with that technology actually is improving things for the patient? Because we can often forget about the fact that in health and medical research, it's all about the patient. I say it's all about the data because I'm a technologist, but ultimately it's all about the patient. Thanks for your time.
I'm going to start the Terry, is there just as much opportunity for mental health utilising your AI?
Thank you. That's a really interesting one. We've chosen some health themes to focus on at the CRC. One of them is mental health, and we do see things like AI being really interesting in that. There are AI services now that look at things like tone in text information, sentiment. So you could analyze. When I used to work at IBM, we'd use a Twitter account of someone that has a lot of information, and we chose Djokovic, the tennis player. And using some AI services, we could do a full psychological analysis of Djokovic based on his tweets, the comments he made, the things he liked, the way he responded to certain types of information on his Twitter account. And I think the ability to unlock that to do good in mental health, the ability to detect where someone might be heading down a dark path, with anxiety and depression, their language changes, and AI is very, very good at picking up those changes in language, the deterioration. So mental health is very interesting. Cyberbullying is a good example where the machine's very good now. Algorithms are being developed, Facebook's released them and others, on looking at those signs of bullying, which can have a big impact on our mental health. So absolutely, the other side, not mental health, but neurological diseases, things like Alzheimer's and dementia, Parkinson's. There was a blood test invented in Melbourne that uses artificial intelligence to analyse that blood test to detect Alzheimer's disease up to 10 years before there are any physical symptoms. So it's just, I don't want to get too excited because the problem with AI is it's overhyped, and the marketing is probably about 5 years ahead of the reality. And I think AI is a very smart 16-year-old at the moment, still has a bit of maturing to do, still needs to go to university, needs to learn a bit more, needs to get a bit streetwise, but it's the potential, I think, is absolutely fantastic on things like the less tangible side, I would say, where they may not be the hard clinical data, but just looking at people's tones and how they act and how they behave is certainly something that's emerging, I would say, Steve.
Max, if anyone wants to ask a question, I'll just keep talking others, but please put your hand up. It's great to have such a strong panel in the room. I know that the beauty with Showcase is we get to sit across all industries, so we get to learn constantly. And do we see that, I know last year before the world went, but I know that the wine industry, had Angela Klotz up here, was really surprised to discover from Karen Kent with Study Adelaide that education had just overtaken wine as South Australia's biggest export, which was quite funny having a discussion. But obviously that's gone and hopefully comes back soon. But would we see health and digital health as what's being achieved with Biomed to become a bigger export for South Australia, or the biggest export for South Australia?
Maybe first, because I was triggered by one of the comments before I go into that question around that multidisciplinary approach. So you mentioned something about agriculture and education, and just an example of it, from a genomics perspective, I think you mentioned the amount of data coming from genomics. The genomics center we established here is multidisciplinary, really integrating environmental and agriculture genomics into our health and medical worlds. So all the experts are specialists, because in the end it's a certain knowledge and infrastructure you need, and that's across disciplines. So, we talk about sectors and markets, but I think that the strength is in the interdisciplinary cross-sectional opportunities. And this, I just mentioned genomics, but that's a great opportunity for states. And again, the companies that reach out to us now, because they're interested in genomics, and some of them have made big partnership, a multi-million-dollar partnership with the government, they are interested in that because we do that multidisciplinary approach with agriculture and environment and health together. coming back to your question, yes, I mean, I talked about the state strategy, and that health and medical is the fastest growing sector currently. It's not the largest sector at this stage, but looking at the growth and looking at the opportunities and the global markets, and combined with the key capabilities that are already here. If, for example, we talk about AI, the Australian Institute for Machine Learning is currently ranked number 2 in the world, in computer number 3, sorry, it's swapped from 3 to 2 to 3, I think, in computer vision papers, which is key capabilities that are applying here in the health and medical sector. If you look in AR, VR, artificial intelligence, we have here, and that was last year's statistics, so it might have changed, but number 4 and several in the world professors in published papers. We are performing really far above world standards across our STEM disciplines. One is world's average. We're performing at a minimum of 1.5, and in some STEM sectors 2.5. So the quality of research we're doing that is outstanding. And then combined with the opportunities of the global markets and the traction we get, very much supported also by the Department of Trade and Industry, to help us attract those key industry players to us. I think we have enormous opportunities here in South Australia.
What I really love is the fact that the hub of Block 14 gets a lot of press and attention. It's nice for you, Terry. These are windows that you get to look out of. And even those Terry's office. A beautiful building, but what's so nice is that the collaborative approach of being able to, there's so much occurring along North Terrace and the Riverbank precinct as such that doesn't get as much light. But it's really exciting to get collaborations from one side, and also the group you were saying with Tonsley as well.
They do a lot in green energy, assistive technologies, manufacturing. So again, a lot of key capabilities that are essential for us, our health and medical sector to grow. So it's Lot 14 Tonsley, but also Technology Park. I think we're less collaborating at this stage, but I think in the future there are key opportunities. So if you look at South Australia, we are an ecosystem of innovation districts. And the more we're connecting up, the more we are of significance and the more we are of value to investments and to companies to attract to us. And that will all help us accelerate in our innovation pipeline and commercialization opportunities. Yeah.
We're doing a lot. Next month is advanced manufacturing with City of Salisbury as a major sponsor. And before these centres and before Tonsley, up in Mawson Lakes, that innovation hub up there was the centre of South Australia for big businesses and a lot of cyber and space before Lot 14 came along. So, thanks to you. Okay, just needed to.
Thanks very much, John Ann with Climate Extremes Consulting. Di, I'm really interested in an early interactor with sustainability goals in Australia. I mean, I haven't seen it before. I'm just wondering about energy security. Was that a challenge for developing that? Because I think with climate shocks and such like, there's been plenty of businesses hit by energy security issues, and I wondered if that played into what you had to go through to get there.
No, thank you for the question. No, we're very fortunate on the sites. We've got a combination of energy sources. What the push is clearly is towards greener energy. And the difficult part for us is that we are the sites. So if everything went to Custard, and if you take Christchurch, when they had the earthquake as a very real and recent example, we have to be able to go into island mode. So in island mode, we have to be able to be sustainable on our own for 48 hours. So whilst we are working to be as green as we've got electricity feeds, we've got 2 sapling feeds, we've got gas feeds, we've got diesel tanks on site, and we've got a cogen plant that we've got. But if we had to do a standalone, we've got sufficient to do what we need. But over time, we will continue to just work on how much greener we can become, because we were designed and developed as a site in 2011, was when the contract was signed for the RUP. And technologies have clearly changed since then. So we're continuing to work with Green Building Council of Australia and others to see how we can continue to improve. But at the moment, we're okay.
Thank you. Inquiring about telehealth, I presume that it's probably picked up a lot over the last COVID time, but where is that going in the future and how does that fit in your lives?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and I was kind of sarcastically laughing when we started to use telehealth a lot during COVID because, my God, being able to speak to your doctor over the telephone without having to go in, that's a novel idea. How long have we had phones for? But, money talks, and it was only when it became a reimbursable item on the MBS that doctors were willing to use it, because why would they do it if they weren't getting paid for it? So we also have to look at the kind of financial implications of what's driving new ways of interacting with the health service as a consumer. We actually just did a report at the CLC called Beyond Telehealth and what's next. So it's a hot topic for us. And I think the next telehealth is part of virtual care, which includes that telehealth, remote interaction with the clinician, but goes a bit further than that and allows us to deliver more health services to people where they live by using technology. It talks about things like digital therapeutics, so the ability to treat people in their own homes, including some of that more complex invasive treatments like chemotherapy for a cancer patient, for example. So doing more of that in the place where people live, I think is kind of the next thing beyond telehealth. And I think where telehealth emerged during COVID because of a safety situation, it's not safe to go in and see your GP, so do it over the phone. We're going to see that happening a little bit more from a convenience point of view, because safety is not a concern for me. That's my personal, I didn't really worry too much about going in and seeing my GP at the height of COVID from a safety point of view, but it's a convenience point of view. I work, my GP is a little bit too far away. I want to be able to conveniently and digitally interact with my doctor versus actually doing it manually and going in face to face. I'd just be happy with being able to book an appointment online to see my doctor. Now, you can't do that all the time. I want the ability to live track my doctor's appointment system. So instead of sitting there for 45 minutes, I can get that 45 minutes back because I look at my phone and okay, my doctor's running 45 minutes late, I've got a bit of extra time, or I might have to reschedule. So I've been talking about the AI and how awesome it is and how cool it is and all these things, but we've still got to do some of the basic things right. But that stat, 75% of people want to use digital services in the future. Most of the telehealth surveys that I've seen, including some that we have done during COVID, specifically on telehealth, there's more willing from the patient population to do it than the clinician population. And we think about having, from an education and a workforce capacity point of view, we think about, well, we have to spend a lot of time educating the patient on using this digital technology. We need to spend as much time, if not more, on educating the clinicians as well.
It's going to be easy for the kids.
Maybe to answer that, when was it? Prior COVID, during COVID, in a conference, and here in Australia we have a virtual hospital. It's fully virtual, and it's a little bit, it's mainly delivering service to other hospitals. But if I looked at the KPIs of quality of care, how they increased, and the reduction in cost, it was significant. And I think it exists, I forgot the name, but around 4 years. I was really impressed. So if we think differently, a virtual hospital, there's a lot of opportunities in there. And not so long ago, my daughter broke her arm, and me and my husband are very busy. My husband is also in the AI and the health and medical sector, and we were just in the parking lot of the school. and my husband literally on his phone showed my daughter's arm, and we didn't have to drive to the Women's and Children's Hospital, back to the hills. You know, we can work, my kid can go to school literally in a parking lot. Okay, now that looks good, no risk, okay, we go off. So, you know, the advantage for you know, the quality of care didn't decrease in that case, you know, that's different in other cases. But there's so many opportunities, so I'm glad that MBS finally is covered by that, because without that system, it would never take off.
It takes a big kick up the backside for a lot of organisations to actually make those changes. I remember my daughter has OT sessions, and then it's the best $250 for half an hour you've ever spent. But during COVID, when this lady held up a piece of paper to try and show it to the camera, and I'm just like, share your screen. And yet the kids, schools in different lockdowns, my two kids at different schools, vast range. One sends out a PDF of things you could do at home, and the other one's, she's only 10, and they're on Teams meetings. Don't worry, Dad, I can do it straight away. So it's a mindset. Nearly raised your hand, that was dangerous. Alright, we've still got time for everyone to have a little chat to each other afterwards. It is a little bit difficult, so I know you have to keep your masks on when we're standing. So, to wrap up today, it's really exciting to have such an exciting panel. It's beautiful to be in the Stanbury building, and I can see this being an ongoing run of a location. There's lots of exciting stuff happening next door. Even with Jamie McClure from Commercial and General making a donation for Bragg yesterday announced. It's really exciting what's happening in South Australia, and this little stretch along here is just, I remember when I arrived 20 years ago, it didn't look like this. And even with the Royal Adelaide Hospital, when you're overseas, some people talk about how expensive this hospital is and was. It's amazing that when you're overseas or even interstate, they're like, wow, look what South Australia's done to invest in its future. So it's a different mindset. Unfortunately, it's taken a pandemic for the rest of the country and the world to realise just how bloody lovely it is in South Australia, and we'll happily keep it that way. So from myself and my team here from Showcase SA, thanks for attending our briefing today. And if you would just like to put your hands together for Terry, Di and Yvette.